and I got
3,
both, but
2,
but
1.
you missed lots of stuff.
We're live. There we go.
Hello.
There you go. It literally does just happen just like that, Sharon. Sharon, thank you very much for
we're live.
Straight in there. Thank you very much for joining us on our Revolution Live Lounge today. This will be going live or premiering 7 p.m. Thursday tomorrow, which will be the 11th. So very much. And this all came about. We just had a quick chit chat yesterday. And the phone call itself started going all down your brief part of it, your Pilates history and your interest in menopause and how that affects the system and the body. I think what was supposed to be about a 2-3 minute phone call ended up being about 20 minutes. And I thought,
really common for me. Sorry, that's probably my fault.
No, well, both me and Ben are exactly the same, and that's why we quite enjoy doing these podcasts.
This could be a new record. This could be like a 4-hour podcast.
Yeah. What is it? Our longest one so far is 2.5 hours.
Yep.
So
we got that in the bag, easy.
Hopefully, Sharon, we won't keep you too long today. For those of people that don't know Sharon owns the Fitness Vault. Is that the correct? Owns the Fitness Vault. You specialise. You do some one-to-one training. You're a keen cyclist, and you specialise really in Pilates. And like I say, the effect of menopause and training as you get older, and that's really something that sort of took my interest. But where did the Fitness Vault come from? When did that happen?
Well, I mean, I've worked as a PT for 15 other years. It was only when I moved to premises of my own, and well, trying to find premises for a fitness studio is, as you probably know, is quite difficult. And pretty much the only place I could find at the time was fitted, if you like, and as a gym. So already had showers and toilets and everything in there. It was a basement, and it's a vaulted basement. It's beautiful. If you have a look on my website,
I have. It looks lovely,
and it's a really beautiful space, and which lends itself really well to the Pilates for sort of the private sort of personal training space where people don't feel like they're being watched and so forth. And because it's a vault, I just thought, well, why not use the fact that it's a vault, and all sorts of odd thing. It was sort of, first of all, it's like this very sort of 50 Shades kind of looking thing. And then with the Pilates equipment as well,
I'm just having a look on your Instagram now. I can see where you get the 50 Shades vibe from. That's a mean bit of equipment.
And once you're in, you're not getting out easily.
So. Oh my God.
We recently just painted our studio red, so we call it the Red Room now, and that's we quickly realised how quickly that connotation will and that reference will get around the place.
You take it how you want. We're rolling with it.
Yeah, exactly. We enjoy our Red Room.
Insurance for equipment insurance and everything. And they said, is it very secure? Or you're not going to get in or out?
There's a reason it's called the Fitness Vault.
Nothing's going to get out easily. So that's where it came from, basically. And as a cycle coach as well, I just sort of ran with the vault fact, and that's then the cycle vault. So I sort of run both of them from there, really. And they kind of working well together with, the functional training, the Pilates, the cycling. So that they all happen there.
And where was it so like you say yesterday, we started talking about you've taken a keen interest in the menopause and how it affects ladies as you get older, and how that affects the system. And now, contrary to my partner's belief, I've never been through the menopause and I never will do.
There is such a thing as a menopause, but it's not as easily recognised or as
Is there actually?
Yeah, there is. Yeah,
I did not know that.
There we go.
Levels they go through a flow of testosterone levels sort of on a daily basis, as opposed to on a monthly basis with women. And women's obviously changes throughout their lifespan, whereas men's changes a bit less. So testosterone levels decrease as men get older, but men have the same. We will have the same hormones that we produce, but just in completely different levels.
I never thought of it that way. Not to take the shift onto men's menopause now. Typical bloke.
You're such a mansplainer, Adam.
There are some men who actually are taking, hormone replacement.
TRT, things like that.
They just get rough as they get older. That's just it, really. That's just the menopause.
Yeah, so effectively, like you say, like if the male version of menopause is as testosterone decreases, and it's the effects of things like that. So then the lethargic nature of having low testosterone levels and things like that.
Yeah, and sort of the lessening ability to build, muscle, is one of the big noticeable things with men when it comes to sort of gym and fitness. And the same thing happens to women, but there's a lot more hormones involved with women's sort of hormonal health as they get older. So men's is a bit less noticeable generally.
So what are those sort of changes, the more common ones and the ones that you sort of come across quite regularly in how the female body changes?
So when sort of, as if you go through your sort of hormonal lifespan, if you like, you sort of pre-menopausal until you become menopausal. So throughout your sort of, puberty, and then your pre-menopausal, where you're, sort of through your years of fertility. And generally you're going through a monthly cycle, and it's fairly, regular for most people. But that starts to change in women sort of, it can be through your 30s, but generally through your 40s. And a lot of women will just sort of, when I've trained women through their 40s and even 50s, through all of my time PTing, I didn't fully get it until I was experiencing it.
Yeah.
And realising actually what was working for us doesn't work anymore. We think, I was doing something different. Why am I not getting the same results I was getting? So as your hormone levels change, so you start to produce less estrogen, the body kind of goes into this sort of like, well, we need to then produce more follicle stimulating hormones to produce more estrogen, and then you get this estrogen dominance, and then it's imbalanced with the progesterone. And so this whole kind of like, instead of your hormones being on a regular monthly, cyclic phase, lower in the first half of the month, and then so you again go through this sort of like haywire sort of sort of hormonal thing. And I openly admit, a lot of women, people go, oh, she's crazy, she's moody and irrational and all these things that us women get kind of like labelled with. Yeah. Really, that happens. And it's not, it's not anything that we've done, or you can sort of become sort of irritable with somebody, or feel moody or whatever, and it doesn't follow the same kind of that sort of feeling hormonal, in the sort of run up to your period, for instance. It can be just all over the shop, and you just, a lot of women just don't know where they are with it.
That must be the tough thing. As Adam said, it's almost this swear word, this naughty label, and it's very, very unfortunate, because the way you've explained it there, you have no control of a chemical reaction that's going on in your body. It must be one, bloody tough to deal with, but also to then, not that you should, but feel like you have to explain yourself to people, generally men who would never understand.
Yeah, and I think more often you sort of get a bit like you go get a group of men together, and yes, they're going to talk about different things to how they might speak in a mixed group. And the same as women's conversation, when there aren't men around, we'll talk about something, and they kind of, because they kind of get it a bit more. And you think, oh, it's not just me then, I'm not just going mad, or, and affecting everything, besides fitness, but relationships, and, I know of,
sorry, don't go mental, bear with me.
And even relationships, I've heard of people who have marriages breaking down and going to a relationship counsellor, and because they don't like their husband anymore, and everyone's annoying them, and and then going to a relationship counsellor and then saying it's not your relationship, you're menopausal, and as soon as they sort that out, they go, oh my god, my relationship was actually okay. It was, it's something hormonal that's a chemical in the body that was what was at fault. So it affects so much of what we do, and energy levels, and the depression, anxiety, big factors. Estrogen is like a train, if you like, for serotonin to the brain, and if we're not getting that serotonin, a lot of women are diagnosed as being depression and anxiety, which is one of the things, but actually it's based on hormones, and often when then hormones are sort of in check and sorted out, then the rest of it falls into place. So it's like treating the root cause sometimes, and it sort of got me really, I think, last year personally, in lockdown, it's changed a lot of things for a lot of people, and I, me personally was thinking it's just the lockdown making me feel a bit different, you know, and then you sort of thinking, well, is it, you know, and then you look into it a bit deeper and you think, yeah, it's not just that. And I think, you know, a lot of, yes, I've got a lot of friends, obviously my age. I was 50 last year. A lot of friends of my age who are all going through the same kind of thing. And then you realise...
You say 50?
Yeah.
Get out of here. Not a day over 30.
Adam, you old smooth talker, you.
I can't help myself.
Bless you. But it's got me thinking about, you know, I wanted to know more about it. You know, if I need to understand this more, I need to help other people understand it more.
Yeah.
My clients and friends and everything. So I took on some studying and training through, you know, lots of different lockdowns in the last year with a lady called Dr. Stacey Sims. She's written a book called Raw, which is really worth reading. Brilliant book. Raw as in lion raw, not raw as in uncooked.
Yeah.
But it's very much sort of generalised with women and working training with women's physiology, not necessarily just menopausal. But she started running some courses online in line with this, and also then looking more deep into the menopause. So that's sort of really sort of what got me thinking about the whole kind of state of women's change, you know, the hormones throughout life, and even changing within, you know, for women who aren't you know, perimenopausal or postmenopausal. Yeah, working in with your monthly cycle, with the kind of different training that you should be doing instead of the first half of your cycle as opposed to the second half of your cycle. Yeah. And you know, a lot of women then tracking their cycles to be able to go, right, I'm going to do that, you know, do high intensity training, you know, the first half of the month, and then as you sort of get towards the time of sort of period, then doing lower intensity, having it as a bit of a recovery week, and working, you know, in a sort of phased training over a, say, 4-week, you know, cycle, tying in with your own monthly cycle. I think this is like we've already touched on it already today, but I think so much of it comes from people's unwillingness to just openly talk about it. I think we're seeing more of it nowadays, which is great. Yeah. It's great to see, whether you're talking about menstrual cycle or menopause, it is great to see and hear women sort of more openly talk about it. I noticed it a few years ago where I'd be talking to any of our female clients and they'd more sort of openly and happily tell you that they're on, you know, they're coming up to their menstrual cycle, or maybe they are a bit menopausal for whatever reason. But like you say, so much of it seems to come from the fact that people are just unwilling to talk about it, and therefore it remains this sort of almost, not even like elephant in the room is the wrong saying, but just like this thing that's over in the background, and it's not until everyone looks around and goes, oh yeah, that's what it could be. And I think it's great that we're moving in that direction. Know what's responsible for something. I don't necessarily have to fully understand it, but I have to kind of at least kind of like, okay, it's because of that, then okay, we know what we're working with, you know. And it's like with mental health, you know, probably 10 years ago even, you know, you wouldn't say to somebody, how's your mental health or how are you feeling, you know, because, you know, you'd just be polite and say, you know, yeah, I'm fine, thanks. But actually they might not be. But people don't like to say, oh, you know, my mental health's not great, or I'm depressed or suffering with anxiety. It's much more out there now, which I think is brilliant, because it's something that needs addressing. And, you know, I was shocked recently to find out that the most common age of suicide is women at the age of 51. And that's the average age of the menopause. Wow. And you think, wow, you know, that's quite awful when you think that the hormones are really, you know, playing such a big part in your life, that it's affecting you that much. It's really sad. Is that I don't know if you're able to decipher, but is that the age of suicide or attempted suicide? Pass. I don't know. Because I know that on average, a really interesting statistic is that more women attempt suicide than men, but more men commit suicide than women. And there seems to be there's a correlation between the aggressive nature of the attempts. So you'll find that because of that slightly less aggressive tendencies on an average, that you'll find that you won't get quite that sort of finishing thing, which you could argue, you know, however you want to sort of go down that road. But it's, I think often with things like that, it's a cry for help often, isn't it? It might not be that actually you do want to end, you know, your life. It's more a case of a cry for help. And
Well,
maybe that's where it comes from. That people
definitely, like there have been moments over the last few years where, and you can. I prior to the last few years, I was definitely one of those people that wouldn't even consider mental health. Wouldn't be one of those things that I touch upon at all. But like anyone, when you speak to them and you sort of say how you doing or how your stress levels, that sort of stuff, and until you've gone over that edge, you don't realise how close you are to it.
No.
It's one of those ones where you sort of say to yourself, like, actually, yeah, I'm fine. Like, I can feel like the weight. I can feel there's something going on, but I'm dealing with it fine. Then all of a sudden you realise, Jesus, I'm literally just, any minute now I could just walk over that. Or sometimes it's the opposite where you think like, oh, Christ, actually, I just feel like I can't get out of this anywhere. And like you say, that's where...
I think I was very proud of my boys in the first lockdown was we'd have the weekly check-in. Hold on, jokes aside here, boys. Is everyone okay? And boys would say, yeah, we're fine, as Adam said, or no, it's getting a bit heavy, lads. I might need a chat here or whatever that may be. And I said to the boys, like, I'm really proud that, we could be a stereotypical... could be a stereotypical bunch of lads here that sweeps it all under the carpet. But actually, I'm proud in the fact that we're all taking it in turns to check in on each other, and we want an honest response. We don't want to, I'm fine, okay, cool, he's all good. We want to know if there's anything you need to chat about. So it's taken this long around that stigma, and hopefully, as we keep saying, that the stigma, which never should be around menopause and all of that, hopefully that's starting to disappear now.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I've actually started up a Facebook group called The Active Menopause, just because, I realise if I put something on Instagram or Facebook and mention the menopause, there's often this sort of tumbleweed. And yet we speak to somebody individually and they want to talk about it. So I started up a group because I wanted to create an environment where women could talk quite openly about something. And not because I feel I can necessarily offer the right advice. I'm not a doctor. But that it creates an environment where somebody else can say, oh, well, I've tried this has helped me, or this. And so people, don't feel alone with some of their symptoms or how they're feeling. But also just that there's somewhere they can go to vent to sort of, has anybody else tried this? And, and I think it shouldn't be within a closed group, because I think it should be discussed openly. But it's, it's a bit like, again, with mental health, or, I don't know, a postnatal, group or something, that a lot of women might not want to talk about their, childbirth experience or the problems they're having post-childbirth. But within a group where they feel people understand, they're going to be more open.
That's so true.
And I think that's, if it takes that for people to talk about it, then fine. But I think in theory it should be more open than that. But
we should probably stop saying it, because the more you say a word like stigma, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It becomes a stigma. But I'll use it for want of a better word. Where did that all come from? Why was it suddenly this hushed taboo that we can't talk about?
I think if you look back in time and 100 or so years ago, there was even sort of like, it was an age thing as well. I think that women weren't living mass beyond 60, but they were having their menopause later. So it was like an end of life thing. And then you sort of felt a bit like, oh, so you were old, it was unattractive. It was, and actually back many, many years, a lot of, it was created almost as a devil. Like a woman's womb was actually thought it was the devil, and they often had, a hysterectomy, their womb removed, that the devil was being removed, because once that actually was removed, the hormones settled, and actually
that's crazy, man.
Sort of, crazy hormonal woman,
It's so nuts when you think back to it, isn't it?
I know, and when you think that actually any kind of prescriptive hormone replacement therapies, if you like, were only actually about in the 60s, which going back a generation, and that's that's
it's not even that, is it? It's early noughties, and the HRT just really wasn't where it needed to be.
No, and it's had a really bad press, because a lot of studies were done in primarily in the States, and they were done in women over 60, women who'd been on HRT for a long time. They were mostly oral rather than sort of topical treatments. And so there was lots of links with cancers, but actually you're more likely to get those cancers if you're overweight and unfit than you are, if you're an active...
and miserable. If you're not feeling great all the time, you're more likely to open yourself up to those negative issues.
But actually, and it's a bit like there being a sort of some bad press on some, I don't know, say antidepressants. So then all of a sudden people go, oh, mustn't take antidepressants, there's all these side effects. And so people just sort of suffer the symptoms of them, which is massive. And the same, happened really with HRT. And they've changed a lot. There isn't the side effects of them anymore. And a lot of them are topical rather than actually sort of, ingested anyway. And there's more benefits to bad side effects. Even down to sort of osteoporosis, heart disease, they're much lower amongst women who are taking. They're not classed as hormone replacements really anymore, because they're not actually replacing anything. They're just topping up something that you're no longer producing enough of, basically. Imagine if men's testosterone levels decline, but not in the same way. But if it was affecting men in such a big way, they probably would be prescribing more testosterone to help men with the symptoms of what they're not producing as much of.
Well, I suppose being in the we've kept up to date with the basis of hormone replacement therapy, potentially no longer called replacement therapy. And understanding sort of like the basis of what happens as you get into your menopause and how you would treat, because obviously that's generally our client base. So we had to make sure. Then obviously being male as well, you sort of always take a keen interest in what you think could happen to you as you get older. So I've regularly looked into forms of testosterone replacement therapy, and that seems to be becoming increasingly more popular. And much in the same way with HRT for ladies and men, like the results are really starting to speak to themselves. I think the generation that are taking them now, and with the updated models of them, I think they're really starting to feel like all the guys that I know who are older who have taken it are over the moon with that. In a weird way, that youthful energy that they've got because of it. And I assume it could be probably something similar to some ladies that are on that sort of thing.
Absolutely. I mean, when you consider that estrogen is anabolic, and if you're not able to maintain or produce the same lean tissue mass as you would have done 10, 20 years ago, it stands that you're not going to be as lean, you're not going to be as strong, you're going to gain weight, and the whole thing can sort of snowball. And women are still sort of very much thinking that as they get older, they need to be doing, sort of low intensity work. I need to exercise more then and eat less. And actually, that's not the case. It's people be going the wrong way.
So glad you said that.
Muscle is
That's
disappearing.
the best bit of advertising we could have ever done, Adam.
Just going the wrong way, as opposed to going, actually, I need to lift heavier weights than I've ever lifted before. And I need to be, looking at changing the way I'm eating, eating the right kind of carbs, eating some more protein, and even things like, branched chain amino acids become even more important to take. I think, when I look back to when I was first PTing, and a lot of women sort of in their 50s would come to me because they didn't want to, no disrespect to any men, but wouldn't want to talk to a male PT. And, particularly then, there wasn't many female PTs. And so a lot of women would come to me and like I said before, I didn't fully understand it. And they would be like, oh, I couldn't lift heavy weight. That's too heavy for me, and still thinking that you need to do sort of 12, 15 reps of an exercise, and just, I need to burn fat, so I need to just go at a low intensity. I'll just walk on the treadmill rather than run, or I couldn't do plyometrics or HIIT training, But actually, they're the things you do need to be doing. You need to be doing more short, sharp, high intensity stuff and heavier weights, and not doing the slow burn stuff. The level of cortisol that you produce as you get older, because if you're doing a low, steady stuff, it's actually stressing the body more, and you haven't got the estrogen to support it, so you produce more cortisol, increased belly fat, anxiety,
strangely enough, so the more mature women were exactly the reason, because they were our client base. That's why our sessions moved to 45 minutes instead of an hour.
Yeah.
Because of exactly like you're saying, actually what you can do is you actually have more flexibility and therefore enjoyment, really, for consistency that you can achieve with the majority of our membership in that short space of time. Whereas as you start to add on that extra 10, 15 minutes to anything, you start prolonging and increasing that stress too much. So it's one of the reasons why we do a 45-minute session, so that we know that firstly it fits in with what most people have as a busy life, and secondly to give us more variety in what we can do in that 45 minutes without having to be too concerned about the stress impact.
Yeah, totally. And and I think also, yes, I know our joints and bones, we feel then they're weakening and we couldn't do that, but actually that's what they need to strengthen them. The lowering sort of production of estrogen also means that our bones are getting weaker. So we need to, reverse that and actually do more of your plyometric stuff and strength training to help, strengthen our bones, along with the whole estrogen level. So it all, a lot of stuff that we do is actually counterintuitive. The stuff that we think is actually going to help and it doesn't.
We need to do a menopausal awareness week.
Yeah, that'd be great.
There is one, and I think it was it was before Christmas. It may have been December.
I have just seen your post. I will let you know.
I'm going to just open my door because the sun's coming in and I'm feeling like it's getting warmer in here, too warm in here.
So World Menopause Day was the 18th of October.
Okay.
If that helps.
Yeah, I knew it was sort of back end of last year, but it's it's great that there is that, and I saw quite a few posts on on Instagram, but again you tend to get the same. If you've got a group that's based on sort of around the menopause, you're going to get a certain type of person being involved with that because they want to know about it. But actually, the people outside of that should know about it as well.
Let's do it. Let's do a menopausal week. Let's do our own one. We'll get you involved, Sharon. Let's do it.
I think you should. Yeah.
Let's do it. We'll do it all on. Yeah. We'll do it all publicly. You can have us two as well, helping you advertise it in any way that we possibly can. I don't really know what we can do, but we can certainly offer our services.
Give me some thinking time. I'll see what I can come up with.
Try and
we'll come up with something comical.
It's interesting what you were saying, though, Sharon, about changing that stigma. I've said it on another podcast, changing that stigma with women about lifting heavy. I keep using that word stigma, about lifting heavy, showing them that actually it's something. We started introducing a heavy Thursday where the emphasis was a bit less on HIIT and a bit more on actually lifting heavier, fewer reps. And hopefully Adam will testify, it quickly became a lot of the female members' favourite day of the week. And our wait list would always be full of the girls that we'd kind of switched their mindset around. And now they were going, bloody hell, I'm showing myself how strong I am. I'm not made of glass. Yeah. I can now deadlift 60 kilos. If you'd have told me 5 weeks ago I'd be picking up 60 kilos, I'd have laughed at you. That was really, really cool to see from our perspective.
Yeah, it is. And a lot of women do enjoy it a lot more than they think. But when you sort of, I can't lift this, and you're like, just try 4 or 5, and then you can normally perhaps get to 7 or 8, but it's just, don't think that, I'm going to have to do loads of these, and it's just not how it is. But it may take a while to lift that kind of vision. A lot of women think, well, I'm going to bulk up. No, you're not.
No, we have that chat a lot as well.
It's just not going to happen. It's just,
Yeah, you have to do it a long time and a lot of it.
And taking a crazy amount of, there's going to be something, whether it be sort of extra sort of steroids, testosterone supplements or something, you're not going to as a sort of a normal functioning woman. But in the same way, if you go back 20, 30 years even, maybe even not as long as that actually a lot of young athletes thought unless their period stopped, they weren't training hard enough, which is crazy because they're running into all sorts of health problems without
Jesus.
That. But it's, and it's, and I think I like to think that, the shape of women has changed because certainly in the 90s, it was sort of skinny was where it wanted to be. And it's changed from that, if you ask a girl who went into the gym in the 90s, they said that they want to, smaller bum, smaller legs. You ask someone now, they want big bum and big legs. It's just I'm about shape.
One of the greatest slogans I've seen over the last sort of 10 years or so was "Strong is sexy."
Yeah.
I thought that was great.
That's your next T-shirt.
Strong is
sexy. Let's get that done. We'll make that happen.
Menopause week. There we go. Look, we've got merchandise for you, Sharon. So, from what you've spoken about so far, you have a new client come to you. They open up. They tell you that they're struggling with menopause. It seems like you've got 2 routes you can go: helping them mentally, because we've got a bit of a what's the word I'm looking for? A responsibility as personal trainers to do that, or you can take them down the physical strength route. What area do you branch off to first? Is there an order you do things? Does it depend on the individual?
It does depend on the individual. And, I can say to a woman, are you having, regular periods? Are you perimenopausal or postmenopausal? And a lot of women who will say, I don't know where I am in the menopause, don't actually know whether they've reached the menopause or not, because it's not very clear cut. And a lot of people don't even know, I'm menopausal. Well, the menopause is actually only a moment in time. So when you've been a full year to anniversary of your last period, then you reach the menopause and then you're postmenopausal. There isn't like a long menopausal thing. You're either perimenopausal or postmenopausal. And a lot of women don't know where they are in that. And that makes a big difference, because once you reach that menopause, your hormones pretty much flatline, as opposed to being all over the show. So, your training in theory, once you reach the menopause, should change. Because it's much more consistent, but you then need to look at, whether you do need any supplementation, branched chain amino acids, do you need to be having more protein, do you need to spend more time recovery, and often actually you don't need to be training more, you just need to be training more effectively. I can say to a woman who comes in and going, where are you in your cycle? Where are you in hormones, in your sort of stage of life, so to speak. And quite often if somebody's completely deconditioned, and it might be that as a part of that, they've had an injury, back problems, bad posture, might actually start off on the Pilates route and go, okay, let's, it's like building a house, start with the foundations and then build up from there. Because you start throwing some heavy weights at a woman who hasn't stepped foot in the gym possibly ever, you're not going to suddenly start throwing some heavy weights at them. So it might be a case then actually of, increasing their cardiovascular fitness along with their core strength and then building up from there, and like building a house.
Yeah, definitely. That's building that strength in range and the confidence that comes from that is so hugely important. And again, we completely agree. One of the things that we do is actually it's how can you set the bar low enough and help building movement patterns and strength in range so that they start feeding, I'm not made of glass, I am a lot stronger than I realised. One lady, obviously I won't mention her name because we're on a podcast and I don't know whether we can do it or not, but when she came to us, she couldn't burpee, which is obviously it's quite a hugely mobile movement for somebody that is immobile. And I remember when she actually did a session where she did multiple burpees through, and she was like, oh my God. And to see the tension that she needed to through her knees and the alignment in knees to the hips to the nice and strong as she stood up, as opposed to when she first turned up and everything was just like, it's fantastic. Fantastic.
That's the reason I asked you that question. You can sometimes reverse engineer things or so like Adam said, because I know you said another part of the mental side of this, not only with your hormones everywhere, is sometimes frustration in lack of being able to do what you once could, or loss of fitness levels, energy levels, muscle mass. So actually we can reverse engineer it to say to someone, look how far you've come, look what we've got you to. And that's where they get that positivity and that self-belief and that energy back. So that's why I was wondering, what route do you take? Do you go, okay, here's what we've got to tell you from a mental health point of things. This is what's happening and why and what to expect. Or do you kind of sneak that conversation in via what you're doing with your training?
Yeah, and you might find the same as this. I've had, some women who haven't trained. They've lost confidence. They've lost, in themselves. They don't, want to even look at themselves in a mirror. They don't feel good about themselves anymore. And they train and then they go, oh my God, I was on a high all day, and then they start to associate that training with, that makes me feel good, and so actually I want more of that, and don't realise that they've been missing those endorphins that, that they're actually very addictive. That when you become a regular gym goer, I want more of that, and I think that in itself, when people sort of start to realise there is something out there that also gives you that bit of a lift, that are so essential to mental health. But people just get into bad habits and, just don't, haven't got that.
Again, like you said, I like that analogy you used, estrogen being the train of dopamine release, endorphin release to the brain. If you can strengthen that train track, if you can keep giving them those releases of endorphins, then that's going to help, I assume, their ability to process what's happening at the moment, and that more positive spin that they can potentially put on it, or more understanding or feeling just a bit better about the whole situation.
Yeah, totally. And it's easy for anybody, male, female, of any age, to get into that sort of downward spiral, isn't it, really? And then sort of lose, confidence in themselves and the ability. And so many, women from when I've worked in bigger gyms, a lot of women who won't go into a gym, and they certainly wouldn't go into a gym on their own. They'd go in with a PT.
Yeah.
But if they step foot in the muscle zone, and amongst these guys, they'd be thinking, everyone's looking at me and I can't do that. And I'm like, well, actually, if you actually looked at what they're actually doing, because most of them don't.
Oh, yeah.
No, definitely. You can see some awful things going on in those areas of gyms. That's always.
It's like there's a cringe and think, I've got to go and say something.
That's always baffled me. It's one of those areas which I believe that should be in the education system, which is how to lift and move correctly. Because I think that you have to train in so many other areas and facets of life before you're qualified to do anything. And you can really. I want to be careful how I put this across, because you do run the risk, but depending on your age, you do run the risk of giving yourself, really damaging yourself in a gym, particularly with some of the weights that you can pick up. Granted, obviously, if you're younger, you're less likely to cause any permanent damage, but it can still happen. I remember when I first started out when I was 16, I wasn't deadlifting correctly at all. And effectively, I never had this diagnosed, but I believe it was my multifidus running up either side of the spine was becoming too hyperactive, and it caused me major issues for about a year. And I was sub 20, I think, at the time. But yeah, it baffles me why nothing like that is in the education system.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I've developed myself doing some sort of heavy weights with squats. And I come from a bad back history myself with some prolapse disc when my children were little, and at that time there wasn't anything available. I just lived in a sleepy market town, and there was no gym. I just had to fix it myself, and got into Pilates as rehab for myself. And when my children were young, and yes, I got strong enough, and then a gym opened in town, so it was great, it's a gym, and go to the gym. And I remember one time, and I dare say it was probably sort of menstrual related, but felt like really bloated, and I was doing some heavy squats and really hurt my back again. And on reflection, I thought, do you know what? I wasn't actually able to engage my core and support myself because I was really bloated. And actually, that's another reason it's not always a good time to be doing those sort of exercises. A time when you're perhaps sort of feeling quite bloated and because you're not able to support yourself. And correct technique then isn't even possible. And that's like I said, that's another sort of factor in sort of the Pilates side of things, in that's sort of the functional core strength is a big part of being able to do the strength training, cardio, running, or cycling, even with a strong core.
You said
great foundations for.
We heavily drill in bracing techniques as part of what we do, and also a lot of people underestimate the ability, the effect of bracing through breathing as well, when learning how to brace and engage that midsection, which, like you say, through Pilates it's a skill, and having to remember that if you don't know how to brace that midsection, it is something that you'll have to learn, but you have to give yourself time to learn it. I sort of say it's kind of like the first time you try to raise one eyebrow instead of both of them at the same time. Once you get there, you can do it no problem. But it just takes a little bit of tweak, a little bit of practice. And then on top of that, making sure that you fill up those lungs, get as much support in that midsection as possible. And really, like you can exaggerate, and you should always have the environment where people don't feel like too much of a tool. But really get people to exaggerate it, pull the faces, get everything involved. And like you say, then people go for that lift and they're like, oh, I've got such a centered feeling as I come out of that movement, and it's great.
And sort of, pelvic floor, a lot of them don't really know where is it and how do I strengthen my pelvic floor. And, I've got 3 children myself, so I'm aware of my pelvic floor from childbirth.
Trampolines make you very aware of your pelvic floor.
I was
Adam.
I've got a grandson, and I went on a trampoline with him the other day, and I was like, I haven't done this for a long time.
Great for bracing exercise, though.
I'm sure I'll be fine. He was like,
Sorry, just to, not to interrupt you. I remember when we went to where's that trampoline place in Colchester?
Oh yeah, I haven't been, but I know what you mean.
So we took I think we took about 30, 40 members over to there because they could join us on a thing. And honestly, I looked around at one point and there was about 50% of our members missing, and they all just come running out the loo, and you just see them dart off every so often. I was like, oh, I had no idea.
I remember this was about 15 years ago, and it was when I worked within LA Fitness then as a PT, and there was a body attack class about to start, and one of the girls come through and she went, oh, I want to do body attack, but I can't. Has anybody got a 10 lady before I go into class? And just said it out loud, like, and we were
good
like,
on her.
Fair play.
No, but it was like, okay, because, with any impact and jumping around, it's like, that's a risky thing to do.
You spoke.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry, Sharon. You spoke about potentially timing your training month and your training program around different parts of your menstrual cycle. Would you ever then use what you called that deload week to potentially program in some Pilates with your clients? And that's the opportunity to work on core bracing, pelvic floor and things like that. And then you kind of coach and cycle that back into, now we're back into heavy, strong lifting. But remember what we've taught and worked on. And
yeah, totally. And it becomes difficult when women's cycles become irregular, particularly sort of through the perimenopause. And then it becomes more important, really, to try not to stress the body with the wrong kind of exercise when the hormone levels just aren't supporting you. But if you're, regularly, if you're pre-menopausal and are having a regular cycle enough to kind of go, I know exactly, a lot of women actually know when they're ovulating. So, if that's the case, right, okay, so it is between your period and when you ovulate, and then after you ovulate, and then that last sort of week where your hormones aren't really working in your favour to be doing any they're not in your favour mentally and physically. So it's not a good time to be doing the really heavy weights, any plyometric work. But that would be your time to, like you say, to do, okay, let's still do something, because actually, it might be that you're, just doing some, flexibility work, some core work, your Pilates type work, just moving in itself. My mum used to tell me this story from when she was at school. So, my mum's 77 now. So we're going back a few years, but when she was at school, and if you went to see the teacher to sort of say, I'm getting period pain and everything, she would send you out of class down to Woolworths. So you know how long ago this was. Would send you down to Woolworths to go and, just go and run an errand for me. Just pop down to Woolworths and get this for me. And she said, guaranteed that by the time you got back from Woolworths, you felt better. You'd gone out some fresh air, you got some exercise. Just the exercise was helping with those premenstrual symptoms. And I remember her telling me that, and then, thinking, wow, why is going to Woolworths going to help you?
Yeah. You're just getting me to run an errand.
So actually, yeah, but you might
pick and mix. It was the secret pick and mix she sent you on. I reckon that's what it was.
That would be the thing.
But that's interesting. Like, I can understand why women might not be forthcoming with that information to the likes of me and Adam. But if we could make them comfortable enough to tell us that, and I think, as Adam said, we're lucky that our members on the whole might not go into the detail, but they might pull us over for a quiet word and say, it's not my week this week. And we'll go, okay, just move, do what you can. Call me over quietly and we can change things. But you could personalize your program to someone so well around that little bit of information, couldn't you?
Yeah, you could. And you might even find, women often talk better together. So it might be that you're almost better to say as an individual, to say to a group of women, okay, anybody here, at the end of this, where are you in their cycle? Because collectively they'll be like, I'm not on my own here. But for a woman to approach a guy on her own and say that, actually that's quite difficult to do.
Oh, of course.
And the same as if you were amongst a group of guys, and I said something to you collectively about some kind of, erectile dysfunction or something, I don't know, something that men don't, you wouldn't want to come to me and go,
it's the same with, I'll imagine it's the same with the lack of testosterone. No man, I'm not saying it's right, but no man would want to admit that, would they? And that's all. No. That's another conversation about societal perceptions and what is the correct man and all this hegemonic masculinity and all that BS. But if we flip it to our side, I can totally understand why you wouldn't feel necessarily comfortable saying that on your own.
Yeah, we may.
Same as you go into a shop and not many guys are necessarily going to feel that comfortable just going up to till, in boots and with a packet of tampons or something, or it is like, you'd be a bit like, oh, I'm going to put this in a bag. I'm
Yeah,
a bit
yeah.
uncomfortable with it, and we shouldn't really. But
No, not at all.
No, it doesn't bother me at all.
It's that sort of. So it might be that if you've got a group of, say 10 women, they might all be. If you said them as a group, do any of you know whether you're menopause, are you perimenopause, are you postmenopausal, where are you in your cycle? That they could as a group do that, to put their hands up and say,
that's good.
because they can giggle about it between themselves.
Yeah, like Scully says, we make a big thing on saying to particularly the ladies in our class, but anyone, actually, on the days you don't feel like doing anything, don't force yourself to. Just come in, come move. Yours is going to be a practice session, and all you're going to do is every rep you're going to try and be better at that rep, but nothing else.
Or it's a sneaky word in their ear and go, I'm telling them to do 20, just do 10. No one will know. No one will ask you questions.
Yeah.
And
but what, Sharon, what would you, when you have like a lady come to you and you start the process and you say, okay, right, we're obviously going to do fitness things. We're going to look at your nutrition, give you some advice on that front. We're going to, like in any form of personal coaching in any way, shape or form now, the mental and psychological side of things has to come into it. So you'll deliver that in a certain way as well. But what is your sort of template to go to? What would you do to a lady who comes to you and says, look, I'm feeling flat. I'm not getting the results that I want. Am I menopausal? I don't know. What's your process look like?
I'm a big conversationalist and a lot will come into conversation. It might be that someone, when you first meet them, might not even be that comfortable still telling you. But the fact that if I just ask the question in conversation, or you might then start training with somebody instead of saying, ask about the relationship and ask about things. And a lot of women will it's like if you have a friend, we've all got different friends who we can perhaps talk to and open up to more than others. And I remember years ago, I had a friend who she just didn't open up to me, and I didn't feel like I could open up to her. Whereas other friends who are just quite open with things, it opens this big gate. And, much like I don't want to sort of speak to my clients about me as such, because it's not about me. But if I do talk a bit about me, people then talk about themselves as well. So that I find it's not an intentional thing for me, because I'm, well, no, you can't shut me up. So it just happens. And the more you chat with somebody, and yes, you'll go through an initial PAR-Q. So you'll go through medical history, and then elaborate on that with medical history. As in any operations, medical problems. Are you any prescription medicine? And then I'll just throw into it like, what's your sleeping like? Where are you in? What are your hormones like? Are you regular? And that becomes part of then the bigger picture. It's not just about throwing straight in there like with this white elephant that somebody might not feel comfortable talking to you about. But so I tend to make that sort of part of just an initial consultation anyway. And generally, if someone approaches you because they want to train, there's a reason why they want to. They haven't just sort of happened to sort of like stumble across you in the street. It's more they've got a reason, so they want to lose weight, or they want to, and you might get to like, well, actually they've got into this sort of cycle of not being able to lose weight, and they're going down the wrong avenue to try and do that. And finding out what someone is doing that's not working for them is a good way of finding out what they should be doing to work for them as well. And I have a lot of people, because of the Pilates side, will come to me because they've got an injury or a back problem. Will often be, some of it, or it might be, weight loss, which is, is very generalised. But yeah, I think just generally talking to people is, you can get a lot more out of a conversation than you can feeling like it's, it's like you go into a doctor's surgery and they're like, right, okay, so what's wrong with you, kind of thing, as opposed to someone who's just like, hi, how are you? Oh, was it raining outside? And it lets down a lot of those sort of barriers, if you like, if you just talk to people.
Yeah, I think
people often want to talk back.
Yeah, I think one of the things I've always found whenever I chat to, like you say, when a client comes to you in any way, shape or form, there's generally a very personal reason as to why they've come to you. You can, I can put an obvious one out there, like generally like lack of confidence or self-worth because of how they think or feel about themselves. And when you share a couple of experiences of other people, not naming names, so on and so forth, and give a couple of nuggets of information that breed hope into them, you find that people quite often open up. Like the consultations I've had in the past, the way people open up when they feel confident enough to, and they know that it's confidential, and they know that you've heard it all before, and it is wonderful. And I say, we've said in other forums, when you first meet an individual, it's almost like they've got like this grayscale Instagram filter over them. And after about 2 to 3 weeks, all of a sudden it's vibrant. And they're just sort of like, they're, even regardless of whether you've done specific postural work, they're upright more, they're smiling more, they've got more confidence in what they do. It's fantastic to sort of see that development.
That's the best.
It is.
The walk into the room with the big proud chest after 2-3 weeks. And are you the same person that came here a couple of weeks ago? Yeah,
absolutely. And I think often, there's that sort of, if you're joining a group, that can be a little bit sort of not humiliating, but it can be quite difficult to walk into a group sometimes. Sometimes just a one-to-one, isn't quite as sort of scary for people. And I often used to think, if I was, training on a one-to-one basis with somebody once, twice, even 3 times a week, maybe, they're probably spending more time talking to you than anybody else. They probably don't even speak to that partner that much, as much as like 3 quality hours a week, or even their best friend they perhaps don't have 3 hours a week with to actually talk to. And you get to know them quite well, and they get to know you quite well, and that in itself builds up a relationship with somebody that they can confide in you. And that's what sort of the counselling side, I suppose, of personal training comes in.
Yeah, well, I think you often find that you are, in a weird way, the expendable professional in their life. So by that, what I mean is that obviously their friends and their family, if they say something to their friends and their family that all of a sudden they're worried about how they're going to react, once they've said it, that's it. And they can't get rid of that person. Whereas with us, we're the professionals. So firstly, they know that we're supposed to act a certain way. And secondly, if they don't like what we've done or how we've responded to anything, they can quite happily get rid of us. So I think that sort of freedom enables people to talk to. Yeah, well, it's true. I think that sort of gives people that freedom to sort of open up and with confidence to us a little bit more. Because my other half said that before. She's like heard a few things in bits and pieces, a few phone calls. She's like, why do people talk to you about that sort of stuff? I'm like, I don't know, but they feel like they need to, so fine.
Yeah. And sometimes it's too close to home for people, and to talk to somebody who's neutral is actually much easier than speaking to somebody who's in that situation, because the problem actually might be with that person anyway. So they don't feel they can talk.
I cannot stand Ben. Get me out of this house and in that gym. Is a conversation I've heard Sam, my fiance, have many times. So now I understand who she's talking to. It's Adam.
Yeah. And I think that's a lot of it. There's sort of the counsellor role of it, and people just being able to speak to somebody else, whether it's in a group or a one-to-one. Have a conversation with someone that's completely neutral, as well as the endorphins from the exercise, and that sort of feeling like they're doing something positive for themselves. The whole package of that is I think is really important to a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely. Sharon, do you just do your Pilates just at the Fitness Vault?
No, so when I took it on there, I didn't actually intend to do any classes there, because it's quite there isn't any one big space. It's sort of like divided into 4 spaces, so it's not great for a class situation. But I was actually doing some small classes there, but I do classes elsewhere, so within the Self Centre and Sports Direct and the Health Hub, and I was doing some of like my own private classes, which I've now gone on to Zoom, which, as a lot of people's work has, which I started doing last March, and actually have continued with them on Zoom because they actually suited people really well to working with their lifestyle with, just they've only got to just click onto their computer. So, at the moment, obviously, as things are, the only classes I'm doing are on Zoom.
But
the space I've got, because I've got the equipment there, most of the Pilates there is one-to-one. Sometimes it's people coming to see me who've had an injury or don't feel they know what they're doing enough and want a few one-to-ones first, to then bring them into like a class situation where they feel happy being in a class situation, or just physically being able to. But with the equipment there, it's quite specialised, and it is often a case of somebody's got an injury or weakness that they want to be able to work on the Pilates, and it's very different on equipment to doing mat based. That's how Pilates started, on with springs and sort of even big cake barrels, as the sort of what's the magic circle, and that's how it actually started. But it's much more.
We can work on the beer cake barrels for you. We can get you plenty of those. That's fine.
If you need them, we'll help out. Well, so how many classes do you like? Let's go post-COVID world, because we've spoke about this with numerous people. I think that the lockdown scenario and the last 12 months, I think, has polarized people in terms of what they're going to be looking for from their fitness goals and solutions. I think you're either going to be one of those people that have said, actually, I don't need anything. I've got the discipline and everything and the mate that can pop round mine, or we can go for a jog, and I no longer need to go to a gym on that basis, which I think are few and far between, those people. I think on the other side of the spectrum, though, you've got people where they're like, actually, I need to turn up somewhere. My home is not the right environment. I need to feel a part of something. So, like, we're very much looking forward to getting reopened, because we think that you're going to see a landslide of people wanting to be a part and be noticed and feel like they are valuable, which is, which we're very much looking forward to. So, how many sessions are you looking at putting on Pilates wise? How many were you doing?
Well, so pre-COVID times, and I was doing between 10 and 12 Pilates classes a week. So that's sort of mat-based Pilates, and then doing one-to-ones as well as. So some will be PT, some will be Pilates, and online cycle coaching as well. But that change has sort of shifted a little bit, and actually doing less of the classes, because I've kind of filled my time with other stuff. More online coaching. I mean, with the cycle coaching, the only downside to that is that people haven't got events coming up at the moment. And last year, people were like, well, we haven't got any events. What are we training for? Some people are like, actually, no, I need it more than ever because I need some structure and some accountability. And other people are like, well, I haven't got a goal, haven't got anything. Oh, I'll just do my own thing until I've got something that I'm training for. So that sort of shift sort of happened. And I found last year, sort of in July, it was almost like the new January, that people have had this time where they haven't been able to train. They were desperate to get back into doing something for themselves. I think people let themselves go more in the first lockdown, because it was like this sort of time we've never had before, that people got into baking and drinking and
wine and cheese. A lot of wine and cheese connoisseurs.
Yeah, absolutely. And then like, okay, I've got to stop this now. I've got to get into better habits. And so that sort of change happened. It was going to be interesting to see what happens this time, because the whole, January, February time of people being really keen and motivated has sort of been a nothingy this year, which is bizarre in the fitness industry, isn't it?
So when I was a young 16, 17-year-old rugby player just getting into the gym, around that time my mum used to do a lot of Pilates, and she loved it, and it changed her body shape, and again, big proud chest walking into the room, and she always used to say to me, Ben, you got to come. And me and my wisdom, oh no, whatever, I won't even get sweaty, it's rubbish. And I now wish I'd have done more of it. And the few little bits and pieces I have, I've been quivering like a leaf. So I suppose two questions. What do you see is the relationship between Pilates and performance, whether that is sporting performance? Because I know there's a lot more rugby clubs now incorporate Pilates programs into their weekly training.
They do.
But that performance might just be the casual gym goer who wants to lift. And I suppose the second question is, why are there not, I could be wrong here, so I apologise for my naivety, why are there not more men doing it? Why is it still dominated by women?
I mean, there are more men doing it than used to. I think women are more aware of women sort of like, as in, I want to have a flatter tummy and a stomach and want to have stronger core and posture. And often women who, after pregnancies and after childbirth, is often a time when they realise they need to strengthen their core. For women, it's often that sort of yoga and Pilates. I think men have historically thought it of being like, oh, that's just too, I don't need to do that. It's just really, I want to do something manly and
that was me, 17-year-old me.
Yeah, and it's just, and I think that shift is happening. And like you say, rugby clubs, football clubs, a lot of top athletes are doing, yoga and Pilates now. And it's not. I mean, Pilates was invented by Joseph Pilates. It was invented by a man. It's not a female thing. But you do find what will often happen. Then you find that with a lot of men who've come to me to do some Pilates has been that they've then had an injury. So they've been, heavy deadlifts, back's gone, and they've been to see a physio or an osteopath, and they've said, you need to do some Pilates. You need your core isn't strong. It's not. Everything needs to connect, and it's not. It's like that missing link, if you like.
And I'm guessing.
And I've got a lot of cyclists who haven't got a very strong core. They've got strong legs, but actually realise that they need to connect this with the legs for everything to be able to work together.
Yeah, if you don't have a core, you've got no transfer of
run
power.
into problems.
And I'm guessing,
Yeah, exactly.
I'm guessing you don't mean core as in six pack and crunches. You mean that connection of the whole body.
Yeah, it's all the muscles that are connected to the spine and pelvis, basically. And people don't see that as being like, it's not just my. People say about my stomach muscles, and I always cringe, like, stomach isn't a muscle, it's an organ, but they think that as being their stomach muscles, But yeah, I think women tend to think of it as because women perhaps have a bit more of a genteel side of things and are happy to do something that doesn't make them feel strong, but actually women should be doing more. So I think to combine the two, the women should be doing the strength work the men have always been doing, and the men should be doing some more of the the flexibility, mobility work.
No, for sure.
I completely agree.
For what the women have been doing. So I think women, if anything, lend themselves better to doing the strength work because they perhaps more aware of their core and doing those yoga and Pilates base exercises.
And they're probably better learners. The ego comes out of it a little bit more, I think.
And it's quite funny, and I know my partner Chris will say the same. That he used, before I met him, he was doing a Pilates class. It was within a cycle club, and they're all like very vocal, very like, and then he'd come into one of my classes where there was predominantly women, and they'd be like, they're all so quiet. They're not all moaning.
So
and
zen.
they feel like they need to kind of go, like,
Look how hard I'm trying.
I did that with my other half. My other half is actually a yoga instructor, although she hasn't done it for a few years now. And I remember when me and her used to go to a couple of yoga sessions. Now, I'm not a fan of yoga. I am a big fan on its effect, and I would never not encourage people to go. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's just not my personal preference. And I just remember the amount of times we were doing all sorts of poses and all sorts, and I was there like, and I just look across at Em, and she's there like this, just holding these arms. Like, oh, for God's sake!
And it's like it actually helps because it helps just promote the control of the breathing, which actually to put that into strength work. I remember there used to be a guy when I always knew when he was in the gym because he'd be on the leg press and he'd be like, ooh, and he'd be this crazy noise he'd make, and you're thinking, just don't, when I was giving birth the first time, my midwife said, shut your mouth and push. And I remember it to this day, and my son's 26 now. But I remember that, and I thought, she was right, because actually being vocal about it wasn't going to help me at all. And I think, sort of, men find that sort of, they want to vocalise it a bit more than women often do.
Yeah.
And I think, men will come out of a Pilates class and kind of go, that was harder than I thought, and I, a few challenges, when I was working in a bigger gym, of, there'd be a core challenge or something, and the guys, I'll be all right. It's like, yeah, I've got I'm used to doing crunches and things. I'll be all right.
Nah.
And they actually weren't all right.
Do you think there's anything to do with again, I'll be careful on how I word it, but like almost like gender preferences or gender strengths and weaknesses? So for example, like there's more and more research that's coming out to say that women, and they're proving it time and time again, have an incredible ability to be able to sustain something for a very long period of time. So when you start looking at ultra marathon runners, so on and so forth, like the ladies are just outperforming the blokes second, over and over. And likewise, you tend to find that women tend to be more flexible also. So those sort of combinations lend themselves to the more yoga Pilates style, whereas guys tend to be less mobile, stronger over a shorter space of time. So the holding nature of things. I don't know what you think to that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and I think women, without sounding sexist, women are designed differently. We are different physiologically. We're different, and women are designed to be able to give birth.
I cannot do that.
For women's hips to be able to widen, to be able to accommodate, delivering a baby is amazing.
My other half
are designed differently to do that.
My other half is currently pregnant with our third. She is a cracking mum, and the way that we've got a baby girl turning up in the next 5 weeks.
Fabulous!
And that means that we'll have 3 kids under 3. And the way that she just goes through the way she just cracks on is incredible. And every so often she will go, like, it is pretty impressive that we can give birth and all that. And I completely agree, it is impressive. However, I do say to her, yeah, well, you and every other mammal. She's then literally she just literally looks at me and walks off. I'm like, yeah, okay. But I do think it is very impressive.
The male just produces and then he dies, and then that's it.
Praying mantis, or we get eaten in the act of, which I think, Adam, you're pretty close.
Yeah, I think,
At least getting killed off.
But, I mean, you're right, and I mean, whether you sort of keep up with the cycle or anything, but a partner and I did a race. Not last year, before now, which is transcontinental race, which is a cycle race across Europe, and it's blooming tough. It's tough. And okay, some of the men who were sort of favourites to win dropped out for various reasons, there's a woman who, Fiona Colbinger, was the overall winner, and it's a massive, it's ultra endurance, but to get a woman to win above all the men as well, in an ultra endurance, in the endurance world. The gap, lessens between the men and women, because it's not about pure strength. There's a lot of mental strength there, and often women are mentally strong. I'm not saying men aren't mentally strong, but women are mentally strong too. But it's not about sheer power; it's about staying power. So I think that there is that. I think that's something which women are often, and men often will have this sort of like, I've seen it with men sort of cycling on hills and things, and they see a hill and they go, right, go to attack it and then burn out halfway. Whereas, women just go, yeah, I'll just get to the top, and actually,
that completely encompasses my other half. Any time we and her used to work out together, she is one of those, and she was the same when she was a swimmer. Her mum always tells a story about when Em would do a couple of lengths. I can't remember how it was that they measured it, and they check her time, and they'd be like, it's an okay time, it's fine. But then she'd do the same again and again and again and again.
Oh, mate, after Emily had Arlo, she used to come in the studio. Oh, Ben, I'm a bit out of practice. Go easy on me in the session. Bloody hell, I'd throw the kitchen sink at her and she'd come out not saying, shut up, stop showing off. Your missus is a beast.
Yeah, she is. She could probably do it now. She's heavily pregnant. She'd probably do it now.
Well, me and Sam tried one of her yoga sessions last lockdown, and she said, "Now I'll go through this with you, but I'm a bit out of practice." Folded in half straight away, and me and Sam just looked at each other. We can't get that out our best. Like what?
Yeah, it's not. I mean, you sort of, in awe of a lot of the, gymnasts, the male gymnasts, because they have often got that flexibility that you don't see as often sort of in men. But when you think about how, a lot of men become quite muscle bound, even in their younger days, and then they don't lose that sort of, and it's, it limits the flexibility and mobility, massively. And I think, a lot of it is down to hormones, or we're down to physiologically. We are just different. And I think that's one of the things that does put men off things like Pilates and yoga, because they feel like, I'm not going to be as good at this as the women who are in there.
I think you're right.
Whereas perhaps you go into a body pump class or something and they won't feel quite so, and you see it in the gym when you look at the participants in, spin, pump, Pilates, and the spin and the pump will have men, the Pilates won't have as many men.
Well, we were talking with Don Heatrick on to do with kids a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, great bloke. Really, he was really interesting actually. And we touched upon the importance of getting kids to explore so many different avenues of fitness in all different realms as much as possible, kind of like almost like the socialization to their fitness abilities. And me and my other half have said, so prior to lockdown, Arlo used to do nursery, gymnastics, swimming, super tots. And then we were just waiting for his 18th month to pass so that we can then go to rugby tots, because you want all of those different elements of him exploring. And like you say, gymnastics and dancers. I think so many young blokes should be getting into gymnastics and dancing to combat those issues, which which typically men will experience as they get a bit older. I think it's so important.
Yeah, I think martial arts. But my boys were all into martial arts. When they were younger. My eldest was a junior black belt by the time he was 9. And they went through the whole karate sort of things until they got to high school. And then all of a sudden they didn't want people knowing that they were a black belt, because they thought somebody's going to pick a fight and go, come on and prove yourself. But actually, they didn't need to, because they were like, I don't really need to prove anything. I'm which I think was good. And I wanted them to grow up with that range of movement and flexibility that you get, through martial arts. But I think that's something that boys, will grow up feeling more comfortable with than if you say to them, come on, just come and do some ballet.
Funnily enough, my mum took me to judo as a kid, and again, I kind of gave it up around 11 because I found football, and then I gave up football for rugby. Originally, my mum wanted it for self-defence, but the one thing I learned from it probably best, which served me through my football playing days, was how to fall and roll. So I've probably used this example in other podcasts. I say it to people I talk to all the time. Playing football, I'd be on the end of a slide tackle, and have rolled and been up and after the ball quicker than the guy who had tackled me. And it just became this second nature. Tuck your head in, land on your shoulder, use your momentum up on your feet, and off you go. So... what Adam said about exposing Arlo, and I'm sure he'll do the same to Theo, to multiple sports. They regularly say the top 5-10 rugby players in the world probably excelled in 5 or 6 other sports as well. We've hopefully got Natasha Hunt, who is English women's rugby player, World Cup winner, Olympian, Commonwealth Games bronze medalist. She represented her county in netball, table tennis, swimming. I think she played high-level football.
Wow.
Just absolute athlete that's had all this exposure to different problem-solving, different motor skills, coordination patterns, hand-eye coordination. I think, as Adam said, as me and him agreed to with Don, we need to be exposing kids to just a little bit of everything, really.
Yeah. I know people who've said before about, classing someone as being fit. And I'm like, well, what do you describe as someone being fit? You might say, oh, that football player's fit, or gymnast is fit. But unless you've actually got a balance of flexibility, strength, cardiovascular fitness, all those factors, because you get someone who's as strong as an ox, but they can't run for a bus.
I think that's when CrossFit first came out. I've listened to a lot of podcasts, and we've probably discussed it, how it's been bastardized in other different ways, but I know their original mantra was always ready for anything, wasn't it? Train everything so you're ready for anything type thing. And you're right. Like, if we go down the mobility route, I've often said to members, I want to be flexible enough that I can bend down into a squat and pick up my kids, and then eventually pick up my grandkids, and you're not struggling to squat down and play at their level. If you said, do you want to come out for a little bike ride today? It might be a couple of hours. I want to know that I'm never matching you, but I'm not going to be left behind in your dust type thing. So
I mean, how many people really don't know how to perform a safe and effective squat? And it would be down to flexibility more than anything else. It won't be down to strength. They can lift a heavy weight, but without either a support belt or without being able to sort of elevate the heels or something, they won't be able to perform a safe and effective squat. Because they perhaps haven't got that range of movement.
Oh, it's cultural, isn't it?
Or even core strength.
I know we speak a lot about the Eastern world still use the squat as their comfortable position to eat, to work, to socialise. We were stupid enough to create a chair and sit in that and get bloody lazy.
I know. Yeah, that's the worst thing ever created, the chairs. But you can find sit on the floor.
That's one of the things. That's something that you bring. Is so useful. What we find, like, bringing to people's attention. Like when someone can't squat, and they haven't done for a long time, and they sort of, I can't. What? And they almost feel ashamed that they can't do it. And you sort of say to them, well, hold on a sec. If you haven't done this for decades anyway, and then you start your day by lying horizontal, then you go to the edge of your bed to stand up. Then you go from there to maybe the toilet seat or the car or the chair, whatever it may be. So your hips are always like that in relation to your knees.
Yeah.
So why would you expect yourself to be? Oh, actually, that's fair enough. Right, now let's put something in place to help you do that. I know, and I've said to somebody, well, hang on a minute, you can't squat, but you can get up out of a chair. You've just squatted as you've got out of the chair and fell down again. But in case of you probably just dropped into it, as opposed to let's do that. Let's get down, up and down out of a chair slowly then, and let's do it with some control. And and it's surprising that actually how well people can do something when they actually see it as something completely different.
That's a whole other conversation about coaching cues, and that's where I get my rugby hat on that I keep sneaking in every conversation, which Adam keeps telling me off for afterwards.
It's hard when you've come from a background of you've got a lot of people, PTs and other people have got a sport or a background of something which they will kind of find themselves referring to, because that's what's passionate to you, isn't it?
Well,
important to do.
I'm obviously passionate about health and fitness and coaching that, but whatever it is, I've just got a passion for coaching. So my other passion and career is in rugby coaching. So just the practice and the art of coaching, whatever it is, absolutely fascinates me. So like you've said, you do squat every day in and out of a chair. You just haven't thought about it enough yet. Or actually what we was talking about later about reverse engineering that success to then bring about and sneak in mental health conversations and rewards that way. Just the art of coaching sort of fascinates me, but I could probably take another hour of your time up with that. So
well, it is. I remember somebody, it was when I was doing my PT diploma really, and the roles of a PT, and that counselling is one of those roles. And you don't do it in a way that you actually, as well as with a hairdresser, in some ways they're counselling somebody because they're sitting and listening to somebody's problems. That in itself is a way of counselling. We all like sort of talk to somebody about our problems and having someone that you feel you can connect to.
Definitely.
Well,
Sharon, we've kept you for an hour and a half, so what we'll do is we'll just wrap things up there. So thank you very much for your time this afternoon, and this will be going out tomorrow evening, so the 11th at 7 p.m. And once we are able to do things face to face, we'll be interested to get you back in, and we can do something face to face rather than.
I definitely want to pick your brains about some of the cycling training and where you've seen the boom of cycling come from. And I know you've mentioned that a lot. We didn't even touch on that, so that's clearly another passion of yours. It'd be great to talk about. But you've said so much. Just before Adam wraps up, like you've said so much there that's got me thinking about different little bits and pieces that I can do to better the experience for a lot of our female members. So thank you so much for that. Really, really thought-provoking.
You're very welcome. You're welcome. It'd be great to talk to you both, and meeting virtually anyway. Everything is done virtually now.
I'm sure we'll catch up at some point soon anyway, so we'll just end that recording. Cheers, guys.
Brilliant.